Yes, I will call the March 14th Town Council meeting to order. Mayor Mark Sukup,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brett Hansen,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake, here, Councilmember Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Councilmember Luke Wagner.
I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it. Aaron, any amendments? Okay. Public comments, Melissa.
First up is Dr. Bill Jenkins.
Okay.
My name is Dr. Bill Jenkins. I live at 5507 Sugarloaf Court. The town of Timnath participated with 8 separate government entities to develop an I-25 corridor plan. The general goal of the I-25 corridor plan and design standards is to create a framework for development that focuses on improving the quality, location, environmental sensitivity, and long-term viability of land uses. The town of Timnath has published its own I-25 corridor design standards that can be found on the Timnath Planning Department website. These standards are important guideposts for development within our town and are well thought out. I'd like to address just 2 of these standards. First, under location standards, these are intended to protect the open character of the corridor and its significant natural features by restricting the types and densities of development in areas identified as having significant wildlife habitat, natural resource, or scenic qualities. The presence of wildlife habitat areas is vital to the ecological balance and rural character of the corridor. Best management practices shall be used to minimize and mitigate wildlife disturbance. All plans that have the potential to adversely affect critical wildlife habitat shall depict and protect important habitat applicable to the site. I think CPW's concerns clearly support Timnath's standards as it applies to wildlife. Under design standards for activity centers, the maximum length of continuous, unbroken, uninterrupted fence or wall playing shall be 50 feet. The maximum height of a fence or wall shall be 6 feet. Given these Timnath standards, it's not reasonable that we would invite Topgolf to build one of its facilities with poles and netting as high as 175 feet and fencing runs in the hundreds of feet. Clearly, there are significant concerns about the impact on wildlife. Why would the town offer the potential of long-term sales tax rebates and 50% discounts on impact and building fees? Topgolf clearly does not conform to Timnath's design standards for the I-25 corridor. This invite to
10 seconds.
Topgolf was a mistake. It needs to be rescinded.
Thank you. Melissa, anybody else?
Next is Harry Devereaux.
I can't hear.
She wants to know it.
No.
My name's Harry Devereaux. I live at 6603 Ridgeline Drive, and I'm here just to summarize some things that I have observed in the 30 days that I've kind of gotten myself a little bit involved. My wife and I moved out here from Fort Collins as we have a lot of our friends that did too. I found out happily from town. We built a home. My wife loves to play golf with her friends and bunco, book club, whatever they do, all that type of thing. I'm not a golfer, so living on the golf course was not that popular to me. People would say, "What's your handicap?" And I said, "Well, it's answering stupid questions like that, you know, type of thing." But I became a little bit more involved during the last election cycle where some of the members of council ran and got elected. And so that's why I got myself a little bit more involved with the neighborhoods and kind of what was going on. And at that time, and still, transparency was the main issue during that campaign, as I recall. So I was a donor and a contributor and helped some of you get elected. So that was important to me. So transparency is the main thing. I am a member of Guider Growth because I am also an anti-Topgolf guy. The name came to my attention through BizWest. And I've known those guys for a long, long time. I didn't know anything about it, but I didn't know, that was, considered a possibility and only a possibility. So there was a letter by somebody in December of 2021 that went out to them as a non-binding letter of interest type thing, as I understand, and it has proceeded from there. So aligning a potential interest. So in May of 2022, BizWest via Acora, where you have to go, came out with a different article, and I became a little bit more interested. And then in January 2023, it came out. It wasn't a big secret. It was Topgolf. So I have a couple of questions, which are not going to be answered tonight. Where's the town of Timnath with they're standing on the design standards of I-25? Where is the town in terms of compliance with the 2020 comprehensive plan? And have we return to Topgolf that whatever may have been represented is not, in play? It's up to the developer to respond to a number of things. And I was stunned that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife sent a 10-page to Natalie Hensel. I feel really sorry for her. 10 pages that she's supposed to be able to respond to with regard issues that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife has with regard to this project. So I'd also like to thank the council with, I believe, the positive input that we got to support the citizen initiative with regard putting the petition on the ballot to vote. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
I did it pretty good. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Anybody else?
You didn't mark whether you wanted to speak. Dustin Camping? No. You do? Okay. Dustin Camping.
Good evening. My name is Dustin Camping and I live at 7044 Thunderview Drive. I'm a husband and a father to 7 kids, and I operate a business that serves Northern Colorado, including Timnath. As Northern Colorado grows, it is incumbent on cities and counties to guide growth in a sensible way. I am here tonight to state my support for the Ladera project at I-25 in Harmony, because I believe that Ladera is an example of a sensible development. First off, Ladera is entirely consistent with the town's comprehensive plan. Multiple versions of the comprehensive plan dating back to 2013 have specifically designated the Ladera property as employment regional commercial. This designation supports centers of intensive economic activity located near regional transportation corridors, providing regional commercial services. Ladera and Topgolf are planned in the right location along I-25 near Costco and Walmart, and will be an economic generator without impacting Timnath's character. Second, the economic benefits to Timnath I referred to and to Northern Colorado more generally are real. Ladera is anticipated to generate $6 million in impact fees for the town of Timnath, $100 million in sales tax for the town over the next 20 years of the project, and will create hundreds of jobs for local citizens. And this revenue puts the town of Timnath in a financial position that will allow them to adapt to growth proactively in areas where growth makes sense, and Ladera makes sense. Lastly, and third, Ladera makes sense because what is there now are gravel pits and a batch plant. Ladera will certainly be an improvement over the current condition, and in a big way. Ladera will create and protect over 100 acres of open space, including trails, parks, and nearly 3 miles of lakeshore. And most importantly, Ladera will bring families like mine and my friends and friends of Timnath and surrounding areas together in a way that could never happen now with the batch plant in place. I know a lot of my friends and neighbors in Timnath agree with me that Ladera, including Topgolf, is good for Timnath, and we are excited for the project to become a reality. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Camping. Anybody else?
Yes. I don't know that they want to speak on public comment. Sandy? Thoughts? No. Okay. Dan Etheridge.
Yeah, my name's Dan Etheridge. I'm at 5765 Isabella in Trailside. Mr. Mayor, council members, on February 22nd, 2023, Colorado Parks and Wildlife addressed a letter to the Community Development Department of the town of Timnath concerning the impact of the proposed development of a Topgolf facility located in the Ladera development along I-25. Per the letter, this site is located within high priority habitat within the Kashlaputa River National Heritage Site. This letter clearly lays out in detail a number of concerns from numerous avian and mammal species prevalent in the area. Among the concerns are the high netting and poles, the bright lighting, and the potentially loud music present at Topgolf sites. The letter cites several studies and surveys of the local avian and bat species that forage, nest, or roost in the near vicinity of the proposed site, including flyover data for protected American bald eagles nesting in the area that have been tagged. These studies clearly show the potential risks to the eagles. This is a single avian species at risk among over 100 additional possible avian species listed in the report and 10 possible bat species that have been identified in the general area of the development. Each of these species is potentially at risk of harm. The letter calls for additional information from the town of Timnath and Topgolf to help the CPW better understand the risks and mitigation plans that will be in place. They have requested that the town put specific annexation code plans for the site on hold until these concerns have been addressed. Will the town of Timnath heed these warnings and do the right thing by placing annexation plans on hold pending further study? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
That's it.
Okay. Get myself organized here. Consent agenda. Does anybody have, the council, have any comments on the consent agenda? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Reports. Does any council member have a report? I'll give a quick one, a fun one. So last week, 2 weeks ago, Chief helped me out here. What day was it that we had National Reading Day? 2 weeks ago. And so the entire staff of our town, including numerous police officers, numerous fire, the officers are men, fire women, fire persons. So the number of fire persons went and read to Timnath grade school. And it was really neat. Kids were really excited to see the officers and they were excited to go with it. And Chief Jones took one for the team as one of the kids puked on him. And so but I'll tell you what, it was the sweetest thing. And granted, I sort of let my my ego go because as I walked into the 5th grade, all of them wanted my autograph. So, you know, they wanted the mayor's autograph, which was real cute. And I'll tell you the other thing that's just amazing. And it just, if, you know, sometimes we get all concerned about where our youth is and stuff. I mean, these kids were so incredible. So I had 4 books: Magic School Bus, Marco Polo, and the American Revolution, and Rembrandt. They all wanted Rembrandt. I mean, when I was in the 5th grade, I wouldn't even known who Rembrandt was. They knew who he was. They knew everything about him. They sat there and talked through. I mean, it was the most incredible experience I've been through. And then every single one of them thanked me for being there and stuff. And then the highlight really is I did the preschoolers. Obviously there we did Magic School Bus. And so we got done with that. And after we got done, all of them came up and gave me a big hug. So it was really a rewarding thing that I was so impressed with the teachers, so impressed with the students and stuff. So I thought I'd relay that on and thank Chief Jones for having your officers out there and stuff. I know the kids really got a big charge out of having them there and stuff. And there was some CSU swimmers and some CSU volleyball players and stuff. So there was just a number of community people that were there that it was heartwarming, I gotta say. All right, moving on. Business resolution number 21, series 2023, a resolution making certain findings of a fact and declaring eligibility of proposed annexation of a parcel of land to the town of Timnath, Colorado, known as Red Barn annexation. Chad.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. So the first three items in business are all related to the same property. So if it's all right with the council and our legal team, I'll just give an overview of all of them all together. And then you can vote on them separately, just noting that items B and C are public hearings.
So what you're going to talk together is 6A, 6B,
yep,
and 6C, just so everybody knows.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So the first item, 6A, is a resolution concluding that the property described as Red Barn is eligible for annexation and complies to the Colorado revised statute. Therefore, the property to be annexed is meeting the criteria set forth by this revised statute and does not require an election. Items 6B and C are for the approval of the annexation and zoning of the property located at 38434 County Road 30 or County Road 13. My apologies. The property is currently owned by 5258 Ranch LLC, represented by Ed Holloway and Derek Hoffmeister. The applicant is Ripley Design, represented by Clara Russo. This petition is for an annexation was brought forth to the town council for substantial compliance on January 10th. Following your approval, noticing for today's public hearing was published for 4 consecutive weeks in the Coloradan. The subject property is located east of Latham Parkway, or now Colorado Boulevard, and directly east of Wild Wing Park, consisting of one parcel of land totaling roughly 2.4 acres. The property is currently located in unincorporated Weld County and falls within the town's growth management area. Roughly 231 feet of the property's western boundary is immediately adjacent to the town, meeting the 1/6 contiguity required for annexation. So along with this annexation comes the zoning. The applicant is requesting to amend the town's zoning map for this property to community commercial, complying with the town's comprehensive plan. As you all may recall, this parcel completed an amendment to this document in October, granting the designation of commercial mixed use. And the applicant is proposing a coffee shop, which is an allowable use within that designation. Again, these applications and the petition have been reviewed against the Colorado State statute and the Timnath Lanes Code. We'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. The owner and applicant team is here if you'd like to direct any questions to them.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments? Yes.
I do have one comment. When we had the first step on this 4 or 5 months ago, we did get a comment from the public about could we put some kind of restriction on this property so that if for some reason this coffee shop didn't work out, the eligibility of the zoning would then rescind and would go back to its original status was a conversation we had. And just for the council's benefit, that was a discussion that I ended up visiting with our planning staff as well as with legal counsel. And it was determined at that time that that was a technique that was essentially called spot zoning, which is legal in some states, but not in Colorado. So that particular approach was not something that was going to work. But I did want to at least report back to the council what I found as I dug into trying to implement that particular piece of feedback.
Thanks, Brad. Can we go through the public hearings first and then the vote, or not? Carolyn?
Can you repeat that?
can we go through the public hearing on 6B and 6C and then vote 6A, 6B and 6C?
I would recommend to first do a motion. No, I would recommend to first do a motion on 6A and then proceed to the public hearing on 6B.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So do I have a motion for 6A? Resolution number 21, series 2023, a resolution making certain findings of fact and declaring eligibility of proposed annexation of a parcel of land to the town of Timnath, known as the Red Barn annexation. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 21, series 2023, a resolution making certain findings of fact and declaring eligibility of the proposed annexation of a parcel of land to the town of Timnath, Colorado, known as the Red Barn annexation.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 6B, public hearing.
I will open the public hearing at 6:21. There's nobody signed up to speak. I will close the public hearing at 6:21.
Thank you. Ordinance number 6, series 2023, an ordinance approving annexation for the property known as Red Barn for the town of Timnath. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve ordinance number 6, series 2023, an ordinance approving annexation for property known as Red Barn to the town of Timnath.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Public hearing for 6C.
I will open the public hearing at 6:22. Nobody is signed up to speak. I will close the public hearing at 6:22.
Ordinance number 7, series 2023, an ordinance approving a zoning map amendment to the annexation of the property known as Red Barn. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve ordinance number 7, series 2023, an ordinance approving a zoning map amendment for the annexation of the property known as Red Barn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Resolution number 22, series 2023, a resolution, approving the purchase of de-icing material for snow and ice removal. Don Toronto.
Yes, sir. We have a report in there. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I think it's sort of obvious we'd want that.
That's what I thought.
All right. Do I have a motion to?
I appreciate that we have a report in there, but I know not everybody watching has read the packet. Don, could you just give us the Cliff Notes version of?
Sure, be happy to. So we've got a budget that exceeds the authorization of Aaron, the manager. And so because of that, we have to go to you. This is ice melt material that we use during snowstorms, obviously. We've got several vendors. They all offer us a CDOT approved low bid number. At least every year CDOT goes through a bidding process for all this material in the state. All the material that we go after has this, and so we get the benefit of CDOT's lower prices. We've got several vendors. Sometimes they have the materials, sometimes they don't. And so we need several to be able to keep ourselves, with an adequate supply.
And does this, I know it's in the 2023 budget, is this stuff that would be applied this spring or the fall or both? Kind of how's the timing work on that?
It's usually applied during and sometimes after snowstorms, and we have two or three different types of material we get, and some of it's temperature dependent. So we have a couple on hand most of the time. Thanks.
Yes, Luke.
Just a point. So it says the existing term is the existing term through September 2023, and then it's renewable up to 5 more years. Is that how the contract works?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so this one potentially we could go out to 2028 then through these contracts.
That is correct. Each year we get we review it again and we make sure that we get all the CDOT preferred prices and that everybody's been operating in accordance with what we felt was a good procedure, and then we renew it if all those things line up.
And just since I'm kind of new to this, I noticed there's just, you said we were zone 4 in the packet, and it looks like the vendors came in with 2 different prices. Is that correct for zone 4?
It can be, yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure I read that. Thank
Sure,
you.
yes.
Yeah, Brett.
Just a quick question. With our application of de-icing material, does that more or less follow the same map as our plowing schedule, our priority 1, priority 2, or is it a different?
No, it is almost exactly the same unless we have some problem areas that we want to go and take care of. There can be storms that have some intersections that are not on priority 1, 2, or 3 that we would go at least sand or salt just to help the process.
Okay. Is this a pre-application or is this post? It's frozen. We've got a thick layer of
No,
ice in the
it's
middle.
during the storm. It's
During
not
the storm.
It's not a pre-app.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Excuse me. Do I have a motion for resolution number 22, series 2023, resolution approving the purchase of de-icing material for snow and ice removal?
I move to approve a resolution approving the purchase of de-icing material for snow and ice removal.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution number 22, series 2023, a resolution approving the purchase of de-icing material for snow and ice removal passed unanimously. Resolution number 14, series 2023, a resolution for the Flockhart Harmony Minor Subdivision. Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. As you'd mentioned, this is a minor subdivision application for 3 commercial lots and 2 lots with no immediate development plans on roughly 16 acres located at the northeast or northwest corner of Harmony Road and Main Street. The owner is Robert Flockhart and the applicant is Verdad Real Estate, represented tonight by Mr. Herndon Luce. The property, as I mentioned, is located at the northwest corner of Harmony and Main. The property is zoned primarily C2 commercial with lot 5, which is generally the existing residence, as R1 Old Town Residential. The proposal is for 1 lot to be roughly 1.5 acres, lot 2 to be 1.2 acres, lot 3 to be 1.2 acres, lot 4 to be 11.4, and then the remaining lot 5 to be roughly 0.67 acres. Both lots 4 and 5 are intended to be left in their current state at this time, with lot 5 remaining that single family residence. Excuse me. This property was the subject of a 2014 settlement agreement between the town and the property owner, which states that the zoning would remain C2. That's why when you see the zoning, it states C2, which is an outdated one for our zoning standards. So that's why you see that difference from that standpoint. This proposal meets lot standards in the land use code for the zoning, which does not have a minimum size, lot size or width. But any future site plan development would need to meet standards for setbacks. This development is also providing street and site landscaping, which is in compliance with the land use code. Even though this plat and lots proposed to meet much of the code criteria, there are significant aspects of the application that do not. Specifically, this application proposes a transportation and street design that does not conform to the adopted Timnath Design Criteria Manual and Larimer County Urban Area Street Standards, which are incorporated into the land use code. Due to the safety concerns that staff has seen with the transportation design, we actually contracted with a third party, traffic engineering, Next Phase Engineering, to do a review of the transportation design, and they came up with the same criteria issues that staff did and basically substantiated staff's concerns. And then within your packet, there is a memo from Ms. Martina Wilkinson, who is a transportation engineer with Next Phase for your consideration. She has worked in Larimer County for 9 years and Fort Collins for 6. So she's very familiar with the Larimer County urban area street standards. So as I've explained and as detailed in your staff report below, staff has determined that the application does not satisfy all of the requirements for subdivision approval and just due to traffic concerns. So therefore, staff is recommending a denial of the application due to Larimer County urban area street standards that are not being met. We do have Eric with us if you have any specific questions on those standards. If you want us to go through those now, or we can go through those a little bit later.
Good evening, Council. As presented in your staff report, the transportation design is not adequate for the existing and planned capacities of the adjacent streets. The submittal does not meet the town's technical standards for transportation access as identified in the town's design standards, the town's transportation master plan, and Larimer County urban area street standards. To make sure that you all are aware of the concerns, I want to go through each of them to get them on record. The submittal continues to focus on just the 3 commercial lots along Harmony, which are part of a much larger development parcel. No master plan has been provided for the overall parcel or restrictions placed on the plat prohibiting future development. The last submittal of the traffic study states on an exhibit, no future development planned, but the plat shows no immediate development plans. The code requires that the design to include future development plans in the anticipated future traffic volumes in the traffic impact study so that the access points are designed with the future ultimate traffic volumes planned. This has not been done. For the right-in, right-out access on Main Street that they are requesting, criteria requires spacing of 660 feet from the Harmony Main Street intersection. As shown, it is at 300 feet. Staff has agreed to consider a waiver for this access, assuming a waiver is submitted per criteria and that they can provide a written engineering analysis that the access will be a safe movement. To date, no waiver or required information has been submitted. For the access on Harmony Road, per the 2014 court stipulation, the access onto Harmony Road from the property is to be a right-in, right-out. In addition, per the court stipulation, at the time of a building permit on the property, the town is to install signs and or do construction, if needed, to permit U-turns at Main Street and Weitzel. This indicates that those stipulations were in anticipation of future development. The applicant continues to insist upon a 3/4 turn movement onto Harmony that they are also indicating would need to be signalized in the future. Per criteria, a 3/4 turn movement, let alone a signalized intersection, is not permitted at this location due to spacing from Main Street. Per criteria in the town's transportation master plan, it is restricted to a right-in, right-out only. If a 3/4 turn was permitted, and again, it's not permitted by criteria nor supported by staff because of safety concerns, their design that they provided is not in compliance with the following criteria. Does not meet the spacing requirements from Main Street, as previously stated. Requirement 660, the applicant has designed it at 600 feet. It is not designed to prevent southbound vehicles from turning left onto Harmony Road. If a 3/4 does not meet storage requirements on Harmony Road for either the interim or ultimate if the entire parcel is developed. Does not have a transition taper into the turn lane or a deceleration area outside of traffic. The turn lane is not fully shadowed. And what that means is on an arterial street, traffic is supposed to be shifted fully to the right before turning vehicles move back into the turn lane. As designed, it just drops immediately into the turn lane. Does not have the required transition taper, which shifts through traffic to the right around the turn lane. Applicant has provided 180 feet, which would be appropriate for a 25-mile-per-hour road, but not for Harmony Road at 45. They've indicated it would need to be signalized in the future to meet level of service requirements. Current signalization in the area and spacing from those signals does not support signalization of this intersection. As they continue to insist on a type of intersection in a design that does not meet criteria, we pointed out to them that criteria requires and specifies a variance process for designs that do not conform. Their response on their 5th resubmittal was no response required and no variances were submitted. So how does the design look when compared to the criteria? I don't know if you guys can see that on your screen, but here's a quick exhibit showing their design compared to the criteria. In the middle, well, first off, since improving Harmony Road to 6 lanes is within the 5-year CIP plan, the design analysis needed to account for it being a 6-lane road. In the middle is their design that was submitted. You can see the short transition length. If that shows up, I can answer questions if it doesn't or point it out better. There's no shadow for the left turn lane. The left lane just becomes the left turn lane. And the short transition again. On the top is what an appropriate transition would look like utilizing the existing bridge to line up to the existing intersection at Main Street. If you notice in front of their access point, there's not enough room in the median left to even consider a left turn lane. The bottom is a design that would meet criteria for a left turn lane. The transition, I don't remember the lengths, but the transition, the tapers, the storage, everything starts all the way back at the Whitesell intersection. It requires the bridge deck to be widened to be able to support the extra laneage in there to get a transition out around the turn lane. Due to the significant safety concerns over the design along a section of road that you're all familiar with, and because the applicant felt staff was not applying criteria correctly after 3 rounds of review, we did have a third-party traffic engineer review the submittals to see if there was something we were missing. Martina Wilkinson with Next Phase Engineering provided this review. As Kevin indicated, she has many years of experience with Fort Collins and Larimer County and is very familiar with our code in this section of road. She came up with the same comments and concerns. And at this time, I'd like her to come up just to present a summary of her findings. Martina.
Is it on?
You're
Great. All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I think Eric's done a really excellent job going through a lot of the specific details that we look at when we're reviewing development proposals. And I think what I'll provide now is just a really high level overview of some of the considerations that really should go into this. As Eric said, I've been doing this for a long time, and now in the private sector, we specialize in supporting communities and implementing their growth plans in a way that honors their adopted plans and their land use codes and their vision for their community. Our philosophy when we approach development review applications is really to start from a position of how do we get to yes. It's not intended to be bureaucratic. But it's really intended to be, how do we make this work? How do we ensure that it's safe? How are we sure that it's going to function? We also know that there's, a lot of applications are, a lot of parcels are difficult to develop. And we have recognized that there's a need for flexibility and some common sense that gets applied to this. But having said that, there is a reason that standards exist. They are based on a whole host of empirical data that over the years has really proven for what works and what doesn't work out in the public roadway system. So anytime that you're considering varying from the standards is something that you want to do with tremendous caution, and a lot of judgment, and a lot of judiciousness. And finally, I've been doing this for a long time, and it is not uncommon for an applicant to come in with a proposal, with really nice renderings and a lot of assurances and conclusions that all is well. And oftentimes all is well. In fact, the majority of time, all is well. But the reality is that when applications get approved, where something gets built in the public right of way, where things do not end up working out very well, the repercussions for the safety and the operational issues associated with that will be the town's responsibility forever. And the developer and all their assurances are long gone. And so as we do development review, we want to be really cautious about the long-term impacts of a particular development. in this location, and Eric had mentioned it, the application or the interest in having that left turn in off of Harmony so close to Main Street is a huge concern. Operationally, from a safety perspective, it doesn't meet a whole host of standards, and there is nothing that the applicant has provided that shows us that there's a design that works, or operationally how it would work, or how that would be managed in the long-term future. I think also it's important to recognize that the applicant did not include the traffic related to Lot 4 as a part of their application. And when we think about a new access onto a major arterial, we want to make sure that that's going to work for the long-term future. And so including all of the build-out traffic is something that would be really important. Eric mentioned that the traffic study actually acknowledges that even only assuming that the traffic is used from just those first 3 lots, that the operations of that access don't work very well in the future. And their response at the time was, gosh, if it's not working very well, you could just signalize it. And again, I'm happy to answer questions on this, but the reality is that that location for a private driveway so close between Main Street and Weitzel is wholly inappropriate for future signalization. And finally, Eric mentioned also, anytime you have a proposal that is not in alignment with the standards, it's really important to go through the documentation of a variance request. And again, as you work with an applicant, hopefully you get to a point where you can agree and support a variance request, but it's important to document it and provide a justification for why that's in the best interest of the town of Timnath. And no variance requests have been offered. So with that, our evaluation was that we absolutely concur with and support town staff's decision that they would recommend denial of this application at this time.
That concludes our part of the report for now.
If you have questions on that, we can do that, or we can turn over to Herndon for the applicant's presentation.
Do you guys have any questions to them?
I do have questions, but I'm indifferent whether we cover them now or.
Can you say that louder?
I do have questions, but I'm indifferent whether we cover them now or hear the applicant's presentation first.
So here's the question. I think we're all wondering, do we ask you questions now? Or should we have the applicant make their presentation and then we ask questions?
That's up to you guys.
I think you'd want to hear what they say.
Yep.
So, yeah, so I'd like to hear from the applicant at this point.
Yep, no worries.
Let's see. Thank you all for your time this evening. My name is Herndon Luce, and I'm with Verdad out of our Denver office. I'm joined here with my traffic engineer, John Aldridge, and our civil engineer, Krista Houchins, couldn't make it, but her associate, Mary Castle, is here in her stead. I'm going to skip a lot of the Verdad intro in the interest of time. But I want to point out that we had our first meeting with the town of Timnath on this project in January of 2019. And while we acknowledge this property has many challenges, in particular transportation and access, we're confident that our design is the best engineering fit for the subject property that allows for safe transportation improvements. Solutions for the floodplain and sewer issues that come along with this property are within reach. However, transportation seems to be the final determination on whether or not this property can be developed under its C2 zoning rights. Tonight, there will be a lot of technical engineering terms thrown around as it relates to meeting transportation code or criteria. And my goal is to illustrate our proposal in layman's terms so that we're all on equal playing field and to avoid a scenario where some professional interpretations may overshadow common sense, logic, and most importantly, what is right. Before we get into the weeds, I'd like to point out that commercial zoning in any jurisdiction must allow for reasonable access, as it not only relates to the end customers or patrons' ability to safely maneuver into and out of these proposed establishments, but also the operations themselves in terms of deliveries, trash hauling, emergencies, etc. This will be important to remember, as we'll discuss later, the settlement agreement that staff seems to believe governs this property's access. As a friendly reminder, we are pursuing a minor subdivision of this property, which is simply an attempt to split this larger lot into smaller lots so that they can be developed as separate tax parcels. Certain criteria must be met, and there are two sections of the code that have been debated over the subject property for 3+ years between the applicant and town staff. Before we get into transportation and access issues, I'd like to point to one of the review criteria items as it relates to future land use. From the beginning, our proposal is focused on these 3 lots, as this area of the property is most usable in terms of access and flood zones. Staff asked us to include this unusable area in our proposal and determine potential land uses, which we did, and identified a potential grocer and sit-down restaurant as possible uses, which would obviously add additional trips and additional strain on our proposed transportation design. I'd be remiss not to point out the fact that we engage an independent third-party traffic engineer to review our traffic impact study. And even with these additional and unnecessary trips to our project, he found that our proposed access was and still is in accordance with the town's transportation plan. I have copies of that letter if anyone would like to see them, but in the interest of time, we'll move on. The logical approach to this issue, however, would be to recognize how unusable this area is and to realize that any future development would trigger, if necessary, a revisit to the transportation improvements as well as the floodplain and associated approvals. Regardless of this back and forth, we are open to staff's request to label Lot 4 as no future development as a condition to allowing this property to be developed under its current C2 zoning rights. Now, as it relates to the access point themselves, we have offered many solutions and compromises to Main Street, County Road 5, future Timnath Parkway access point, and are in a position to consider the right in, right out only movement on Main Street after navigating any necessary variance process, of course, but cannot achieve reasonable access without the 3/4 movement left in only on Harmony, which will be the main subject of discussion tonight. And most, if not all of our comments will be directed towards a resolution of that access point on Harmony. The first set of criteria that we disagree on states that the utility and transportation design is adequate, giving existing and planned capacities of those systems. We should place extra emphasis on the word planned here in just a moment. But first, I want to point out that we do meet criteria in the existing condition. As defined by Lucas standards in figure 8.2, a desirable design in this scenario would require a 180-foot bay taper, 140-foot deceleration lane, and for this project in PM peak hour turning movements, an additional 100 feet of storage, which is what our design allows for. You'll notice that it is very similar to the design of the turning lane at Whitesell for westbound traffic taking a left into the Costco Center. This issue gets murkier as we consider planned capacities of these systems. To put it plainly, in the event that Harmony is ever converted to 6 lanes in the future, it would be difficult to meet the standards I just mentioned. However, this is a short-sighted approach to the issue at hand, as this hypothetical doesn't take into consideration the balance of Harmony Road, in particular, the west side of the bridge. The west side of the bridge as a possible 6 lane in the current bridge configuration, converting to 6 lanes would result in losing the westbound left turning lane into Whitesell or Costco. There is potential to retain a center median and allow for both movements to exist with minor modifications to the bridge that I'll let our traffic engineer further explain later. To summarize, our proposed 3/4 on Harmony meets code in the existing condition as a 4 lane and should not be blocked due to a hypothetical 6 lane condition until the west side of the bridge is further thought through as a 6 lane arterial, since that scenario seems very unlikely given the current bridge configuration. This discussion could have been entirely avoided if this property's access was considered during the design of Timnath Parkway, which begs the question, why would this property, a large commercially zoned parcel that seems to have so much history with the town, be excluded from the design of Timnath Parkway? Could it be poor planning, negligence, or just a simple mistake? Or could it be because of the 2014 settlement agreement that, for whatever reason, staff seems to continue to point to as the instrument solely governing access to this property? I can only speculate. But what I can do is point to the settlement agreement itself. Staff continues to point to this agreement and more importantly, misinterpret it and misstate it. The agreement states the access to the plaintiff's property remains as it is now in place, and the town will permit a right turn lane into and right turn out of the property at no cost to the town, as depicted on Exhibit A attached. The intent of this sentence was to grant the property owner access to his property for the current use as a residence, not to bind the ownership in perpetuity with unreasonable access in the event of a development under the property's rights as C2. There is also no mention that the access cannot be modified in the future, as staff continues to imply. Furthermore, last month, Planning Commission, actually 2 months ago, we got continued, It was stated that the settlement agreement allowed for an allowance for the installation of U-turns at the intersection of Whitesell and Main Street. This is incorrectly stated. I'm going to go back to that. The agreement states, and I quote, "The town will install at its own cost appropriate signs and or necessary construction that prevents U-turns at each of the corners of Harmony Road, which abuts planners' properties as depicted on Exhibit A at the time a building permit is issued for the site." I'm no traffic engineer, but I can say with confidence that I'd be much more comfortable making the three-quarter movement left in than a U-turn at this intersection, especially if there are plans for 6 lanes in the future. Regardless, we have yet to see any design on this and have taken the liberty to prepare these exhibits that show a fire truck trying to make this U-turn. In the current, and this is the exhibit showing where the U-turns will be permitted. This is an exhibit showing the current condition, existing condition at Harmony and Main. You can see the truck is jumping the curb, and this is the future condition, also jumping the curb. As you can see, it doesn't work. And I'd be curious to know what the fire marshal thinks of this access, but even if they were on board, it's not considered reasonable access for commercial zoning. If this is problematic at Main Street and Timnath Parkway, I can only imagine what kind of problems it would create at Whitesell. Before I wrap up, I'd like to ask town council to take a look at this proposal through a different lens and to think outside of the technical criteria that could be debated until the end of time and take a minute to focus on something that we can all agree on. The traffic congestion at Whitesell is getting worse. The traffic issues at Whitesell, I believe, are directly related to the tremendous amount of growth that Timnath has experienced over the years. That growth is something to be proud of, but with it comes the need for additional goods and services. Demand is not something that can be harnessed, and more times than not, all we can do is affect the supply. In this case, demand far outweighs the supply in this immediate area, which is why the traffic congestion at Whitesell seems to be worsening. Our proposed subdivision will be the initial step to allow for more goods and services, and it's worth noting that these are not destination type users, but rather convenience plays. So it's worth pointing out further that this project would only capture existing traffic and not exacerbate it with additional traffic. I want to clarify that I'm not suggesting this proposal will be a solution to the Whitesell traffic issues, but it will, without a doubt, take pressure off of that intersection. To illustrate this, we took placer data of similar retailers at the existing Whitesell intersection of what we'd like to propose one day at this project. We took Chick-fil-A, Murphy USA, Wendy's, Starbucks, Taco Bell, and Costco as our case study subjects. Placer tracks and takes cell phone data for those of you who are not familiar with it. And this data here shows the traffic patterns of customers of each of those brands. As you can see, the vast majority of these customers are primarily utilizing I-25. However, there's still a strong enough following for the patrons coming from and going to the east. With these graphics showing traffic patterns before and after their visits to the Whitesell location, we can say with confidence that adding these similar goods and services will take some pressure off of that Whitesell intersection for westbound travelers. Before I turn it over to John, I just want to comment on a few things. We're not proposing a traffic signal. I don't know where that came from. We're shooting for the three-quarter movement. That was mentioned in our third-party review that is also a reasonable outcome, but we're looking for compromises from the town on this access point. The left turnout does have a raised center median, so there is a physical median for cars to not be able to take that left turn. They could jump the curb, but we can't control illegal movements. As it relates to variances, the variances weren't brought up until the 4th round of our review process. So we're happy to revisit that, but at this time, we don't feel like we need a variance for Harmony Road. We feel like we meet criteria. With that, I'll hand it over to John.
Thanks.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is John Aldridge, and I'm a Colorado registered professional engineer. And I come to you with 50 years of experience. That's all the gray hair and everything else on me, right? But I've done projects, planning and engineering projects throughout the country. I've done work in Miami, I've done work in Los Angeles, done 3 major highway projects in Michigan, and I've done transportation plans, for Pensacola, Marathon, and throughout the country. Obviously, my main work effort is right now in Colorado. And I was a deputy project manager for the Spear 6 and Lincoln reconstruction, Denver's only tunnel. And then I was the chief engineer for the consulting team for the reconstruction of East Berthoud Pass. I was also the chief engineer, again, for the consultant team on the reconstruction of the I-70 mountain corridor. So what you have on the express lanes on the corridor were basically my idea when we first started on that project. So I've been around the block, let's put it that way, and I've dealt with a tremendous number of designs. I currently have probably about 100 traffic signal designs under my belt, and I've done a number of three-quarter movements on projects throughout Colorado. So these three-quarter movements do work well, and they do provide a very efficient and safe way to get in and out of some of these projects. The design, if we look at, if we can go back, forward. Okay, this meets all the standards, right? But it's on the 4-lane facility as it exists, okay? And we can reference all of the figures in the Larimer County standards to show that this does meet them. It's an 180-foot bay taper, 140-foot deceleration lane, and we've got a 100-foot storage facility on just this particular design. We also are proposing a channelized pork chop, if you will, for the right turn movement, so that prevents any of the left southbound left out. Okay, and we could also put a median in there along the tangent of the storage lanes that would also present a very difficult move for anybody wanting to make a southbound left out. So obviously this fits and it works and it meets the standards. And as Herden said, it's a mirror image of the left turn lane that goes to Whitesville right now. So the challenge that's been presented to us is to do this on a 6-lane facility. Okay, and it is a challenge and we don't meet standards. But we do meet, if you will, a context-sensitive design solution. What we can do within the context of the area and the land use, et cetera. So it's a best engineering fit, okay? But I don't like it. That's all there is to it. So when I started looking at a little bit further, and looking at the bigger picture, if you will. Okay, what happens, if you build the bridge and you take out that center median, okay, then you also eliminate the left turn lane on Whitesville and would prevent anybody from going, westbound left to go to Costco. That's not something you want, okay? But there is a solution, okay? And I think, when one of the graphics that was presented earlier shows that if you widen the bridge, you can create that center median, and then you can put in a proper, a standard or something that meets standards for the left turn lane. Okay. So the problem is then the bridge. And if you can look at the graphic up top, okay, this is the way it's been designed for 6 lanes without the center median, okay? And, again, that would prevent left turn lanes either in either direction. That's just a clearer view of what would happen, okay? So the number 3 lane, which is the left turn lane, now actually becomes a through lane with a 6-lane facility. But what we can do, and we can meet standards, is some minor modifications to the bridge. Okay, by cutting back the sidewalk and the bike lanes. Okay. Laramie County standards, which is depicted there in table 2 or 7.2, is states that the minimum sidewalk width is 6 feet. Okay, right now the sidewalk widths out there are about 10 feet, and there are 8 feet. So there's more than enough room by cutting back some of the sidewalks and still meet standards. And this includes the bike lane. The bike lane standard is 5 to 7 feet. We can put in a 7-foot bike lane, 6-foot sidewalks, 7-foot bike lanes, simply by taking off cutting back on the sidewalks, which are just sort of laid on top of the deck. You don't have to do anything with the deck, the girders or widen or anything like that. You can just cut back that sidewalk width. And you can cut them back enough so you would create a center turn lane or the center median, which will then allow you to keep the left turn to Weitzel. You could probably even lengthen it if you wanted to. And it would allow then us to maintain a left turn lane into, or 3/4 movement left turn into the property. And it all meets standards, okay? All meets standards. Now, there was one issue with the 4-lane. Was mentioned that it was only 600 feet, the entrance to the property from the 3/4 movement to Main Street is about 600 feet, okay? But when we look at what's going to happen to the Timnath Parkway, when that comes in, which I believe is fairly soon, then we're going to be, well within that 660 dimension. So, or we could even move the access if we need to the west about, 50 to 60 feet to meet the standard. So that's really the only standard that we're sort of missing right now with when it's on the 4-lane facility. And then when we get to the 6-lane facility, we can meet all the standards. I think it's important also to know that, even with my 50 years of experience in doing this, that we have a code of ethics. And I'm a straight shooter. I'm not going to, come give you something that's, sugar coated or anything. It is, it is my obligation to you just to make sure that it's engineering, that it's meets all of the criteria that for safety and for meeting the standards and efficiency operationally. When we recommend a signal, if it ever comes to it, it fits. 660 is the distance that is sort of golden, if you will, in terms of traffic progression. It allows really to have what we call a bandwidth easy. And we're not stopping the eastbound traffic. This is a 3/4 movement. So the only time that westbound traffic will be stopped if there's a call that comes on for the presence of the vehicle. Okay, that's what it would look like with the 6 lanes. Okay, we would have the 180-foot bay taper, the 140 foot deceleration, which by the way is fairly generous because typically the 140 deceleration lane length actually starts about the center of the bay taper. So we've got probably almost 200 foot of storage there. And this is the way it can be accomplished with the minor modifications to the bridge, where we would have the the continuation of the left turn lane on Weitzel, and then the left turn lane onto into the access. You know, there was a lot of talk about us not being transparent. I think we've gone through a lot of things with this particular project. You know, we originally were thinking, you know, about doing a roundabout. You know, you have roundabouts on 2nd Avenue, on Signal Tree, and they're very effective. Very, you know, we were going to recommend a roundabout on Timnath Parkway that would allow access, you know, to all directions, and very efficient and safe access. But that was not considered. So anyway, I think you know, what we're proposing here needs some more work, and I really want to work, you know, be happy to work with staff and Martina. Have greatest respect for Martina and would love to work with her to, you know, polish this up, if you will, and bring it to fruition. So I think Bob now wanted to make a statement, or if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
I think we may have questions later, but
Sure.
We'll let you listen.
Okay.
I just want to state for the record that your staff has not reviewed the documents.
I'm sorry, is this Bob Flockhart?
Yes.
Okay.
Speak slowly. I want to state for the record that your staff has not reviewed the documents that you reviewed as your mentioned as historical and comments by the Flockharts in their analysis of what's going on here. And I just want it in the record. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Flockhart. My brain hurts. So let's see. You know what? I think I'm going to go off the reservation here a little bit. Eric, I'd like you to respond to whatever you wish that the Aldridge group brought up, and let's try to keep it at 5 minutes. And Aldridge group, I'm going to give you the same chance.
So this presentation and review from us was based on what the applicant had submitted over the last 5 submittals. What they presented to you tonight, this is the first time we have seen this. It was not presented to planning. It was not presented to us as an engineering design to review. It is a schematic shown on a PowerPoint presentation. We don't know if it works or not. Some initial concerns looking at it, because we have looked at some other options. The bridge modifications are not minor. What I see them proposing there gets rid of the vehicle crash barrier, the guardrail. The rails on the edges of the bridge are only pedestrian rated. They won't stop a car. Narrowing of the sidewalks, the south sidewalk is the Poudre Trail and must be 10 feet wide. The sidewalks currently have utility conduits running through them that would need to be relocated to take away sidewalk width. Trying to think of some of the things off the cuff. Like I said, we had to be presented with this. Regarding the Weitzel intersection, going to 6 lanes does not eliminate the left turn into Costco. The Weitzel intersection was built 15 years ago and does have some issues and concerns that will require being addressed when it goes to 6 lanes and probably construction in the intersection to make that happen. The most recent traffic impact study that looks at that intersection shows that the right turn lane becomes a right through lane based on the turning movements. So the 3 lanes actually become the right through lane into Walmart, the 2 existing lanes leaving space for the left turn lane into Weitzel. There are some issues coming off the bridge with the width, but again, those are known issues. It was a design from over 15 years ago. We don't know what their 6-lane design was. We're going to have to come up with something. We don't want to replicate issues at that intersection at a brand new intersection that should be built meeting today's criteria and today's requirements. There's some confusion over the traffic signal, it appears. The applicant says no traffic signal is planned, but yet their traffic engineer talked about a traffic signal.
I think that's plenty.
Okay.
Eric. That's plenty. Eric. So Aldridge Group, I'd like you to respond. I would like to understand why this is brought to the attention of staff today, as opposed to even, that means it skipped over planning and zoning too? Why it wasn't presented to planning and zoning and the staff?
I really can't answer that. I mean, I think, we started to look at this probably a little bit later than we should have. As far as planning and zoning, my wife and I were on a 50th anniversary cruise and I couldn't make it. I didn't want to leave her on the boat alone. So that's why we missed it. I really want to work with staff. I really do. And I think this is really a good idea. I understand some of the things that that Eric is talking about. The sidewalk, yeah, that's, there are guardrail on there. And, but if you look at the bridge that goes across I-25, there's no guardrail between the bike path and the sidewalk. We could still put in guardrail. We have enough room to be able to do some of these things. We have a 2-foot gutter pan. And I've looked at the bridge design and I see where the conduits are located. So we can cut it back without disturbing the conduit that's under the sidewalk right now. It's more towards the edge of the bridge. I didn't see any sort of 6-lane design at Weitzel. Okay. When I looked at all of the bridge plans and looked at the Harmony construction plans, there's still an issue when you come from a certain point on the bridge where the directional lanes are side by side, so east and west. You've got to fan out to get that left turn, and how you do that would be very difficult. Coming from off the bridge, the way it's designed, or the way I've shown you, when you come off that 3rd inside lane, you can't just shift it over. That's not going to be standard. What you have to do is to, fan it out properly. And by the time, there's only 325 feet between the edge of the bridge
So I don't think we need the details. I was mainly curious with the big picture, if you wanted to talk about anything there. And I think we've got a picture of it, but I'll let you talk if you'd like.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing.
Me too. So I think we've got everything from you right now without specific questions. So if you like, what's your name again? I'm sorry, I apologize.
John Aldridge, Aldridge.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. I'm going to go off the reservation again. It seems like you know, we've got different stories. Mr. Aldridge it seems very reasonable with some of the things he's talking about. He's way over my head on engineering and what's there. This seems like an issue that needs to be tabled. I don't see as they have all the information that they need from staff, or at least that's what they believe. I think staff just received a bunch of information that they had never seen before, and therefore to ask them and us to respond is premature. And I mean, and I don't know if the rest of the council will want it, but I'd first like to know, is that an alternative that we can do?
You could. What you have before you is the subdivision plat as submitted. So anything new that's been presented today is not what's before you for consideration. So if you have a motion to approve, it would be, or to approve or deny. And I know your board packet included only a resolution to deny. I have a resolution to approve right here. So if you find that the criteria are met, I will hand this out, and we do have that available for you. But you are making a determination based on the subdivision plat before you. So your options are to approve, to deny, or to approve with conditions. If you want to table this, it would be helpful to let them know what they'd need to bring back. But if it's a complete new plan, then I guess it wouldn't be a new application and probably be a revision of the plan. If they'd like to apply for variances, if there are any conditions and criteria that are not being met, then that would be a separate action to apply for those variances.
Hey, Mark.
Eric, could you give me some thoughts on that first? Sorry, Brett, I'll let you. Oh, Kevin, I don't care.
That is within your rights to do. If you guys, like Eric had mentioned, this is some new information for us. The applicant did request that this, what was in your packet, be brought forward to council for consideration. So that was also requested of the applicant. You know, the waiver aspect that was, you know, brought up kind of in the second submittal where we asked for justification. We like to get applicants to meet criteria first, and then that's why the waiver was mentioned later on in submittals, just because without meeting criteria, that's the last option. We don't like to throw that one out right at the beginning for road criteria. We like to get them to meet it from the beginning. So if you all as council want to direct the applicant to resubmit to this new information for us to consider, we can, or you can take action as they've requested to staff on what's been submitted and presented to you in the packet.
Okay, I think I'm going to open it to the discussion before we go to that. So go ahead, Brett.
It would be my understanding that if we table this, we're essentially bypassing any further input from Planning Commission as well, right? We're trying to make adjustments at the very back end of the process.
If it is a new updated submittal, it would go back to Planning Commission.
Right, but if we just table this and say, go make these changes and then come back to us, we're just at the very back end reviewing this. There's no, because as was mentioned, this was never.
Wait, I think you're saying something different than he's saying.
I'm getting further clarification on the process. If we move to table this, then Planning Commission essentially has never ever weighed in on bridge modifications or anything of that.
And I think he said that Planning Commission would weigh in. So what's the answer?
I'll let Carolyn, but our preference is if it's a changed plan, we would bring it back to Planning Commission for their reconsideration.
I agree with that. So you'd be tabling the current plan, but it would be, if it were resubmitted, it would go back before them. So then basically the tabled action wouldn't go forward. It would be it'd be scheduled for a new hearing.
So we're just tabling indefinitely if we were to go that route?
Yeah, it'd be basically tabling indefinitely. If you do deny, that does not prohibit them from coming back with a readjusted plan right away.
Okay.
So even if you disapprove the current plan.
So there's none of the year waiting period or anything like that we have in similar.
In our land use code, there is, but it has to be a substantial change that staff would have to support to bring it back within a year.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I stand corrected. So what they're talking about, would that constitute a substantial change sufficient to?
If that design changed, we would consider that within the year, yeah.
And it is within council's authority if we want to waive any waiting
Correct.
period for whatever reason.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah, no,
our options there.
good questions. Any questions?
I guess I want a sense of which direction you want to go here. If the applicant has thoughts on tabling or if they want an answer now, because I think that, at least for me, drives how many questions I want to answer
Okay.
today versus if
Do
it were to
later.
come back to us, yeah.
So I don't disagree with that. So would you like us to table this, or would you like us to make a vote on the motion in front of us?
First, I want to make one clarification. Our design has not changed at all. All we've done is backed out and shed further light on the future condition of the 6 lanes. That 3/4 movement design has not changed from the beginning. But I do want to understand our options here one more time, if y'all could clearly outline that for us.
Go ahead, Carolyn, or Eric, I don't care who. I think I understand, but I'm going to let you guys say.
So certainly you have, if the current plan does not meet existing criteria, then the process would be to apply for variance as to the criteria that were not met. Okay, even if it is just one criteria that is not met, that would be the standard. And that would be the process. So then if this is tabled indefinitely, you would be going back, meeting with staff again, making any additional revisions would be basically a 5th submittal. And at that point, applying for a variance for anything that's not met, it would at that point come back before Planning Commission and before council with the request for the variance and with the revised plan.
If the vote is no to not approve this resolution, do they have a waiting period that they must wait for before they could present their plan?
There is, in the code, it says it's a year, but council can waive that year.
But council could waive it.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there an option to be voted on with conditions?
I'm sorry,
Yes, it
could
is.
you repeat that?
To be voted on with conditions?
That is an option. That's correct. And I'd like those to be as specific as possible. So if it were specific changes that were, so they'd say, we'd propose to, we'd approve the plat with the following changes, increase to the taper lane or whatever. Ideally, that's very hard to do with the plat because staff has not seen those revisions and done the full traffic analysis on whatever those provisions are proposed to be, but that would be.
Unless any of my fellow council people disagree, I think that's the issue. We're not going to play engineers on this and make suggestions or conditions. So that I do not see happening. Do you guys agree? Okay, we all agree. Yes, Eric.
Just real quick, I wanted to clarify what they're showing here that they say they've submitted as a 3/4 term movement has not been submitted. This
Okay.
project is with the 20-year plan. They have to design for the 20-year plan, which is the 6 laning of Harmony Road. So no design was submitted showing this as the left turn movement. We could look at an interim plan, but they need to design and provide an ultimate plan that meets the 20-year build out.
So here's what we're asking you. First off, would you like us to table it? And tabling it, you'd go back to planning and zoning, come back before the council. Would you like us to vote? If we vote for it, you're happy. If we vote to not approve the resolution, then what happens is you could have a year wait before you can come before the planning and zoning again.
Or Mark.
You know what? If you want to walk outside and talk about it a little bit, that's fine.
Yeah, we're going to take a minute. But I would also add that if we are talking about the future ultimate condition, 6 lanes, we should also be seeing design from the town on U-turns at Whitesell and Main Street stipulated by the settlement agreement.
So what you're bringing forward is more reasons to table it.
I'm not trying to, sir. We've been dealing with this project for 4 years now, and the goalposts keep moving on us. And so we're trying to find a determination on whether or not this property can be developed under its current C2 rights. And it just feels like further delays, but I do appreciate y'all's time and giving us the options up here right now. So if you don't mind, we're going to take a minute and talk about it in the hall.
That's fine. If you could take 5 minutes and let's just do a 5-minute recess. Hey, Carolyn, can I talk to them?
I can just announce that we are coming back from recess at 7:30.
Okay.
7:31.
Before we get going, we have found the criteria from the land use code that talks about the 1 year waiting period
Okay.
and when that applies. Kevin, would you mind reading that out loud for us?
Yep. So our land use code says subsequent applications. Following denial of an application, the decision-making authority shall not decide on the same or substantially the same application within 1 year of the date of denial. The waiting period may be waived in an individual case for good cause shown by the decision-making authority upon a written request by the applicant.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, your options are, if you
I
can.
think it's the same as what I said at the
Yeah.
first.
Okay.
I don't think it, he reiterated what I said.
Thank you. We'd like to request that this is tabled under two conditions. One, that 1 year waiver requirement, 1 year resubmission is waived. And then also TST would recuse themselves from reviewing any of our materials moving forward. And we would work directly with Ms. Martinez at next phase. And that request is due to TST's prior dealings with the Flockhart family.
Okay, just a sec. I got to think of how we do this. I think, okay, Carolyn, I think what we do is we vote on tabling with the conditions that he requested. Whatever that ends up, that ends up. Then we vote, then we ask questions, or we could ask questions now. So let's ask any questions that we have now. Then we will vote on whether we table with conditions. And then we vote on the resolution or not.
Tabling with conditions is highly unusual. So I think maybe a better direction would be to move to table, but then also to have a separate motion to waive the 1 year period and to have a separate motion to direct that.
I don't think we want to do that.
Okay.
I think, well, I'll just make my own comments now. I think it's onerous for somebody to tell us who our staff is and how we handle them and whether they are allowed to work on a job or not. So to me, that is a critical item, which I would not want to table with that being held over our heads. But I'll let anybody else talk.
I just have a quick addition to that. So if we table it, there is no 1 year requirement anyway. That's if we deny it, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Robert.
Mayor, I share your thoughts that our town staff is our town staff, whether they're staff or contract. They need to do their job. And so that's not a condition I would likely support. Yeah, so I don't know. We can have a discussion on the motion to table, things like that. But if that's a condition on their request, my thought is we probably ought to just proceed with the rest of the hearing, get all of our questions answered, and then move it to a vote this evening.
Brett or Luke?
I'm in agreement with Robert there. I think we move forward the hearing and move to a vote.
I agree.
I agree. So, so I think we're at the point where any council people have questions for either the applicant or the staff?
Actually, I do have one question for staff. Carolyn, it is my understanding that it's pretty established case law that a zoning of a property does not guarantee what the property owner views as the highest and most profitable use of that property. Am I correct in that understanding?
That's correct. And I believe staff feels very strongly that there are a lot of permitted uses within C2 that would be accommodated with a right in, right out turn, but it is not a taking if you are just not, there's no requirement that you have to use the highest and best use of property as long as there is a reasonable economic use of the property.
It's my understanding this is a 40, 50-year-old precedent that goes to the Colorado Supreme Court. Is that accurate?
It is very well established case law.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody? Robert?
I've got a lot, so if you've got a little, go ahead.
Mine's a little. Mine's more a comment rather than a question, related specifically to the fact that one of the things we get, or one of the comments we hear most often from community members, is related to traffic in that general area. And in general, I feel like if there are items that don't meet what is listed in our documents as code or anything like that, that in my mind, the burden of proof falls on the applicant. John Aldridge specifically said, maybe we're not ready for this, or made a comment similar to that, or about rushing through things. And I don't feel like the applicant has said enough related to the items that were presented to us to make me feel comfortable to allow something like that right now.
I'm going to direct these first questions to Martina, but if others have thoughts on this, I certainly welcome them. One of the concerns that was raised is long-term, this could lead to a signalized intersection that is too close to either the Main Street intersection or the Parkway intersection. Can you talk a little bit about what is the danger, or why is it a bad idea? Why does that standard exist to prevent signalized intersections too close together?
I'd be happy to. You know, oftentimes when you think about a particular access or an intersection that might not be functioning very well, it is not unusual for people to say, well, gosh, let's signalize it, because there's this impression that is by definition going to be an improvement. To begin with, I think it's really important when you're thinking about signalization to understand that there are both pros and cons to the potential for signalization. You know, as a matter of you know, in normal practice, there are no crashes at that location right now. It doesn't happen because all the traffic is going the same way. You know, you add an access and you start creating conflict movements, you know, that generate the potential for risk. If you signalize it, I can tell you that right now there are no rear end crashes on Harmony Road in that location. You put a signal in, you will generate rear end crashes. Light turns red, people run into each other. So you want to make sure that when you choose to signalize that you're doing that because the benefit of that signalization is outweighing the risk that you're creating. There are a number of different evaluations you can do from a safety perspective for whether or not a signal actually is a benefit or a detriment. And, you know, John even spoke to this, there's a real science to the ability to progress traffic through a number of signals. And I mean, all of you, I'm sure, you know, just from driving out there, when you sense the challenges that exist in that corridor as you come through these signalized intersections at Signal Tree and at Main and at Whiteshall and at the interchanges, it's a huge challenge to try to progress traffic through there. And the ability to do that in two directions is infinitely more difficult with every signal you add. And so, except for if there was a really specific analysis that was done where they come back and say, this is justified for these reasons, here's the safety benefit, and here's why this is not an operational detriment to the town. There is no scenario under which I would stand here and recommend even consideration of a signal without really careful analysis, and that hasn't been done.
Thank you. And then John, I don't know if you had any comments on that.
I think what we have to do is also look at, there's a myriad of three-quarter movements, throughout Colorado, throughout the nation. And the majority of them do work exceptionally well. They're recommended by the State Highway Department quite frequently. With regard to signals, yes. What happens is that you will reduce the broadside type accident, okay? But you will increase the rear end, okay? There's absolutely no, in terms of safety, okay, there's no such thing as absolute safety. Every time you have a point of conflict, you have a potential for a crash, okay? But crashes are rare and random. Now, I'm just quoting from the Highway Safety Manual, which is a voluminous document. It's an amazing document, actually, with ways to look at intersections, their configuration, and we can determine, just by, reviewing this particular document, that with a three-quarter movement at this location, we would have a rate of about 4 accidents per year. Okay? 2 of them will be rear end. One would be a broadside accident, and the other would be either a side swipe or some other option. So we know there's going to be there's a rate associated with all accidents, with all intersections, and even on just, straightaway roads. So there is, there may be a cost to putting a signal in, okay? But then it's, the benefit is you would have a safe passage, if you will, to the property. Let me think. Oh, in terms of progression, signals are just getting smarter, very smart. There's what we call the real-time adjustment into, how the signals operate. They talk to each other. And so when you get a certain number of vehicles in a platoon or whatever that need to go through, then the signals can adjust instantaneously anymore to, react to that particular. So you can get progression, you can get, a smooth flow. And, with this particular location, you're not going to stop the eastbound traffic. It's just going to be on the westbound and coming through that particular signal. And it's not going to be operating very long. You just don't have a lot of traffic that's going to, stop, if you will, or you're not going to have it cycle for 2 minutes or anything like that. It's going to be very short.
I appreciate that explanation. Do I understand it correctly that any signalized intersection there would increase the expected traffic accidents? Is that correct?
Well, you would get it's the rear end type, which is generally just property damage. But you would abate some of the severe accidents where you may have injuries or fatalities with the broadside. Okay. So you would reduce that, but increase the rear end.
Would you agree that those expected accidents under that configuration would be greater than a simple right in, right out without a 3/4 or a signalized?
There'll still be, with the access, you're going to have more. Yeah. I mean, you have more points of conflict.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. Okay. Martina, I was hoping that you could talk about the proposal here is, or at least the concern from staff is that the proposed left-hand turn lane deacceleration lane is too short as proposed. Can you talk about what is the danger of having that lane that is too short? Why is that a concern?
There's a couple of things that we look at when we're considering the design of turn lanes. The urban area street standards has really detailed specifics in there for what would be required if you're expecting vehicles at a certain speed, and what will it take for them to decelerate, and how long will it take for them to stop, and how much room do you need? And so those are some of the things that were spoken to here. And it's important for, especially along major arterials, for turn lanes to be designed in a way so that they minimize the impact of the through traffic. So you don't want people having to slow way down before they finally get to a lane. That works on slower speed roads. On higher speed roads, you really want them to move over before you slow down. The other thing that's really important to consider is, especially when you're talking about 3/4 movements, is how long will people need to wait before they find a gap to go? So if this is not a signalized intersection, they're going to have to sit and wait. And so another analysis that would be important to do is, how long do we think that queue will occur? How long will the number of vehicles that sit and wait? And if the number of vehicles is long enough and your lane is short enough, then those vehicles can start queuing into your through lane. And that becomes, a tremendous risk in terms of rear end crashes, side swipe crashes that occur at these kinds of locations. I'll be the first to say that 3/4 movements are excellent kinds of movements. As John said, they occur all over. They're a great tool to have in the toolbox. I'm a big proponent of 3/4 movements, but they need to be done in locations where you have enough width and you have enough length, and they're occurring in a space where you can allow them to function in a way that works. In this location, when we think about the queues that even occur from Whitesell, we'll have westbound queues that occur from Whitesell all the way to Maine. And so when that occurs and those queues occur all the way across the bridge, and you're going to have these cars waiting to turn left across the queue from Whitesell, that is a concern that doesn't work well on an arterial. And for a private driveway where there is no expectation in the urban area street standards to provide anything other than a right in, right out, it is something where we wouldn't recommend that that's in the best interest of the town.
And you mentioned that 3/4 maneuvers can be effective. How does that compare on a 4-lane situation versus a 6-lane situation? Once you add that extra lane, does it introduce additional complications?
It can. 4 lanes is always, it's a little bit easier to find a gap with 2 lanes that are coming at you than finding a gap with 3 lanes that are coming at you. It really depends on the function of the overall roadway. There are locations where you can have 3/4 movements that work really well on 6-lane highways. Where that works really well is if you have a lot of spacing before and afterwards, and if you have an upstream signal that really meters the traffic. So you get this big bunch of traffic that comes through, and then you get this huge gap in between, and lots of people can make that turn. We've got a 3/4 movement on Harmony Road, just a mile or two to the west of here, into the old HP facility. It works really well. But it's because the platooning of the vehicles that are approaching allow that to occur. In this location where you've got so much more going on, with the signal that's so close at Maine, you just don't really have a lot of platooning that occurs.
Thanks. And John, I'm just curious if you had any response to any of that?
Yeah, as I said before, I've done a number of these, but one in particular stands out. And that is on Hamden, just east of I-25. I don't know if you remember, there was an old Marriott hotel at that location, and there's a 3/4 movement that the properties was redeveloped as a shopping center, and they wanted to keep the 3/4 movement. But the city of Denver and CDOT said, hell no, we're not going to look, because this is accident prone, right? So I looked at 7 years of accidents or crashes, or if we have to call it now. And there was only one that would be attributable to that 3/4 movement, only one. That was 7 years. And so they allowed it to, remain. And it's a very short, heavily traveled roadway. In fact, people have to cross over 4 lanes. to get into the shopping center from that movement. But it works, and it works well. And we did some other design things with it. So we put in sort of a release lane. If people would back up, then they could, travel down to the signal at, I forget the name of the street, but anyway, turn in from there. And I've done others, I've worked with standards, particularly with Loveland. If you're familiar with the intersection at 287 and 57th, right there is a Burger King and a gas station, a car repair, and a tractor supply store. Well, I worked on that project very diligently with the city of Loveland, and we had to change the standards. We had to make it fit, and we came up with the best engineering fit. And it's heavily traveled, but it works well. And it allows people to get out of that shopping center, make us, left turn at the signal and go southbound. There's just many, many examples of where these things fit within heavy traffic. And, again, there's no such thing as absolute safety.
Thank you.
And most of them, obviously 99% of all accidents are human error. Someone gets distracted or they're on the cell phone or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right, and then I want to shift gears a little bit. Whoever from the town feels best qualified to answer this, but the bridge there, in addition to going over the Poudre River, goes over the Poudre River Trail, which will, in the coming years, be a lot more functional as the connectivity is built through the I-25 underpass and whatnot. One of the proposals from the applicant dealt with shrinking both the pedestrian and bike lanes on the bridge there. I'm just curious if you could talk about if there would be an impact to Poudre Trail connectivity and accessibility if that were to be adopted.
So as Eric had mentioned, the south side of the bridge is the Poudre River Trail. So we have a commitment to make that a 10-foot wide trail throughout the community. So one of the proposals is shrinking the size of that Poudre River trail over the bridge, which, Matt's not here, but that being one of his babies, I know he would not be a proponent of shrinking down that sidewalk across the bridge, because once you get underneath from the Walmart side, you pop up right onto the bridge at that 10-foot in width. So with that being the primary, area for the Poudre River Trail, we would have concerns with shifting that down from the 10 feet in that, unless there was another location that was provided, which we do not have one at this time.
Okay. And then, certainly one of the concerns is 3 lots here are proposed for development. But then there's the lot 4 that may or may not be developed in the future. I'm curious about what the real impact of the floodplain, the flood zone is in there to the practical developability of that. Is it something that, the land can be modified and it is developable, or is this really something that's ultimately only suitable for open space?
Some of that area, specifically the floodplain area, is developable with the appropriate modeling and permits and FEMA approvals. There are also existing lakes on the property, but there are areas that are outside of both that could be developed in the future. And that is the concern with seeing this submittal with just the 3 lots and the traffic from the 3 lots and not the remainder.
Yeah, and I think back to the Walmart parking lot and how maybe not having a clear understanding of long-term what that lot was going to look like. Maybe a design early on was approved, maybe not thinking, far enough ahead in the future. Is that the sort of concern that you're expressing here? Or?
Yeah, because development of additional parcels generates additional traffic. And instead of trying to maximize the C2 development on the entire parcel. Because of the difficulty of the site, there are natural restrictions. And so need to look at what C2 developments would be able to work with the accesses that they're able to get.
Yeah, an analogy that Steve brought up some time ago is that if we had the Walmart, let's say, development in front of us, and all they had in front were all the lots that are now, and the large Walmart area wasn't predicted, you know, and then you developed all the lots without having an understanding of what's coming from the large lot. You know, that's just not a responsible way to do it.
Thanks. Those are the questions I have. I'll have some commentary before we vote, but thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? So let's first vote on
Public hearing.
Mayor.
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Public hearing.
I will open the public hearing at 7:56. If nobody has signed up, I will close the public hearing at 7:56.
Okay.
And I'd just like to note that everything that's in the board packet, in the council packet, will be submitted for the record, as well as the staff report and the discussion here today. Thank you, which includes the landowner comments that they wanted considered.
Okay. So Carolyn, you had a progression that you wanted to go through here. So
you could have a motion at this point to approve the application as submitted. And as I noted, I do have a resolution to approve that if you'd like to go. It's still labeled Resolution 14, 2023. You also have before you a proposed resolution to deny approval, and it does set forth findings that are the same findings set forth in the staff report as to the criteria that are not met. You could also approve the application with conditions, or you could table the application either to a set date and ask for specific information to be provided back to help us prepare for that, or to continue it, or just to table it without a set date to bring it back.
okay. I'm going to just do a head nod. Does anybody, would you like it to go to vote on a resolution right now, as opposed to going through the tabling discussion?
I mean, I'm okay tabling or voting. My reason for leaning towards tabling is to give the applicant more opportunity to look at some of the traffic pieces, especially the ones that staff hadn't seen prior to tonight. But if we vote, I'm ready to do that too.
Robert?
At this point, I think that we should vote. And if it's not successful, they can bring it back, and the council has the authority to waive the 1 year. But I do think, but before we vote on whatever it is, we should probably make a good record in terms of our thoughts and why we're voting, whatever way we vote.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to present it this way. Do I have a motion, which I may not, do I have a motion for resolution number 14, series 2023, a resolution for the Flockhart Harmony Minor Subdivision? Okay, the motion dies due to lack of support. Can we just leave it like that, Carolyn?
Well, if you want to just call for any motion, let's see. Yeah. So the first, you call for a motion to approve resolution 14, 2023 as in the council packet, which would deny approval.
This has a deny? I didn't think so. Is it?
The one in your council packet is to deny.
Okay, in our packet. Okay. Yeah,
You asked
I
for a
did.
motion to approve. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. So you don't have a motion to approve.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a resolution number 14, series 2023, a resolution for the Flockhart Harmony Minor Subdivision? Do I have a motion to Help me.
To approve the resolution denying the minor
To
subdivision
approve the
application.
resolutions in the board packet.
And I would move exactly that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Oh, wait, but you want to call for discussion before you vote?
Do I need to?
Yes, I would recommend that. Yeah, I know
Okay.
that, Mr.
Do we have, oh, you've got something you want to say?
Yeah, I do. First of all, let me start out by saying I am so sympathetic to the property owner and the property rights here and want to be supportive of being able to develop that property as zoned. My concern here is that it really feels like despite years of effort, there still really hasn't been a meeting of the mind or a significant discussion between our staff and their developers to really understand each other and the issues. And I would encourage both sides to keep working on that. At least me personally, I want to see a solution here. But the proposed solution does cause me a significant pause. The applicant's expert indicated that the proposal does not comply with standards. We heard a lot of discussion about the safety concerns, about the variance, waiving the standards that are out there. And I didn't hear anything tonight that made me feel compelled or comfortable to disregard those standards. I'll also note that harmony is very much a hot topic issue for our town. Harmony traffic is, if not number one of the top three things that we always hear about. And so any modifications to that, I think really need to be something that everyone is in support of and that it makes sense. We look back to the Costco intersection, and I think a lot of lessons have been learned there. I would hate to see us, not learn from history in that. And then also, we talked about the Poudre River Trail and how designs could impact that and prior commitments that we have with the Poudre River Trail. That is a high priority for our community and the region, that the Poudre Trail function well. And this will be a major access point for that connectivity. So I would really hate to see any designs that impact the usefulness of the bridge there to pedestrians and bicyclists. And so for those reasons, I encourage the council to deny the application as recommended by staff.
Okay. Did you have something?
Yeah. Just to add to Robert's points with regards to our reasoning for our votes. Honestly, I saw a lot of or a lack of cohesion with the applicant's presentation tonight. Stuff about, I don't know where a signal came from. There is going to need to be a signal at some point in the future. We'll do 6 lanes this way. 6 lanes are hypothetical. I lost track of how many times I heard the phrase, this doesn't meet standards as it is, but we can do modifications to a bridge. And I watched the planning commission meetings, and a lot of this was the first time I'd seen any of this concept of we're going to modify the bridge to make this property work. I think there's a lot more work that has to be done to get this ready for me to vote to approve an application. It's just we have the standards. They're pretty black and white. Staff laid it out. Our third-party engineer laid them out. And a lot of the rebuttal was, I have experience doing this and it'll work. And we can't take our hot spots of traffic and rely on that. We just can't. So my hope is that this can develop. I would love to see some exciting commercial opportunities open up there. I'd like it to be done safely. And for that reason, yeah, I'll be voting to deny this application.
Anybody else?
I don't have a whole lot to add other than just kind of reiterating what's been said as far as not meeting those criteria. And anytime it comes to safety issues, I think we have to be more diligent about looking at that. And so I just want to reiterate those pieces.
Oh, I'm sorry, Luke,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
I echo Lisa's comments. The speed, the shift just gives me a pause for concern. And I think I appreciate the staff's work to present the Larimer County urban area street standards, and that's how I'm voting tonight.
Okay.
From a procedural standpoint, you now have a motion and a second, and I recommend that you revote after that discussion, please. Recall the motion.
So all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. I'm going to make just a quick comment, so just off the top. I think, sir, if you would spearhead this, I liked your logic. I liked your thoughtfulness. I think this might go a lot smoother. Ordinance number 8, series 2023, an ordinance amending chapter 16, article 6 of the land use code. Kevin Coble.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a proposal to amend multiple sections of the land use code to provide some greater clarity on items relating to use regulations, development standards. Basically what we have identified are updating areas of landscape design, permitted uses, electrical vehicle parking, charging requirements, site lighting, waivers, parking requirements, and then a couple of other cleanup items for harmony corridor and dimensional standards. These changes also aim to provide a better clarity on sections of the code for xeriscape options for developments and tree lawns in front of folks' homes. And then just based on the nature of current development. So what I did at Planning Commission was I kind of touched on each one and had a conversation on each. I'm more than happy to do that. Or if you guys have a different way you want to go about it, let me know.
Robert, do you have any questions?
I know I'm the squeaky wheel here, but I like to give the people that haven't read the packet enough information to understand what we're talking about. So whatever you think the best way to do that is, Kevin, I'm supportive.
Yeah, and that's what we did at Planning Commission was I kind of just went by section with generally what the proposal is, and then and then offer that up for conversation. We can just kind of go one by one if that works. So the first one is this is the first one on xeriscape options. This is a change to section 577 in relation to tree lawns and xeriscape options. Pretty much within this one, what we've done is we've added in basically kind of the 7 principles of xeriscape to our land use code for landscape design. This is just more of a way to get developments that have open space, some things like that, a little bit better on water usage and like soil improvements and plant selection, some things like that. So we essentially just in this section added in those design principles of xeriscape. Any questions on that one?
Okay. No.
Okay.
Just keep going unless somebody looks up or turns their light on.
So this next one kind of elaborates a little bit more on that. And this is landscaping within the right of way. So majority of your all homes have about a 3-foot landscape strip, that we call the tree lawn. Our current code right now states that it needs to be a live ground covering. What we've added in is actually an allowance for to have actually only 75% minimum of live ground covering. So if somebody wants to, provide 70 or 25% of that tree lawn to be a non-live ground covering, we have the ability to review that. And then also kind of with the xeriscape design with those principles as well, just kind of allowing the changing of some of the turf grass to be, ornamental grasses, shrubs, things like that from that standpoint, just to start giving some flexibility. The next one that we have,
sorry, Kevin, can I just, why did we cross out ornamental for tree lawns?
Yep. So ornamental trees can be smaller than shade trees.
Yep.
So we wanted to be a little bit more specific that it has to be a shade tree, just not having a smaller ornamental. So that's why we changed that from ornamental just to be the overall generic shade tree.
That's one I'm going to possibly suggest later on that we actually just keep to include ornamental. One is that sidewalks have been lifting up in the neighborhoods because shade trees obviously take up more space, and they are sometimes more water efficient as well if we have the smaller ones.
Yeah, so I can just touch on that real quick. A lot of the ones that are, I think, heaving in your neighborhood are that they are a oak tree when those should not be a right-of-way tree to begin with. So
Yeah, we changed that recently, I think.
that is more of a new standard that those trees are not in the tree lawn. So that's where a lot of those sidewalk issues are coming from, is the oak tree. So we, with landscape plans now, we don't allow those. So that's the reason why your neighborhood specifically has a lot of those sidewalks that are starting to heave. It's just because it was the wrong type of tree that was planted in that tree lawn. The next one that we have is for adding in a new use to the table of uses. This is for a seasonal and holiday sales. So your Christmas tree lot, pumpkin patch, something like that. We didn't have anything in the code specifically on it right now. So we just kind of wanted to add in that specific language on that type of use for consideration. In the recent years, we've gotten a couple of inquiries on it, which never actually came to fruition, but we figured, we might as well, as we're starting to grow a little bit more, to have that requirement in there. The next one is on changing for electric vehicles. So this one is actually a little bit of a larger change. So currently we have our criteria about allowing, generally all level 1 and 2 in every zoning district, with some allowance for, level 3 to be in certain districts as well. What we've basically done is stated that the level 1 is generally only in residential. So each one of your homes, and that's where it's only going to be permitted. And then allowing level 2 to be in generally all residential and commercial zoning districts. And then level 3 is only permitted in the higher commercial districts of CCRC and CMU, with the requirement that at least one level 3 is provided when we have a development that has more than 200 parking spaces. The other changes that we did was we made it clear that there at least needs to be one. The original criteria was that any commercial that had a minimum of 75 spaces provide one. We've changed it that any commercial now has to provide a charging station regardless of how many parking spaces, and then an additional charging station per every 75 parking spaces. And then the next thing that we've added is one charging space for every 50 parking spaces required for multifamily, and that's an addition to their required. So if they were required 200 parking spaces, they would have to provide the 200 normal and then add in the 4 additional on top of that to meet that for a multifamily development. And then we've also done a couple of changes with the adding in an accessible EV charging space, as well within that. Any questions on that one? I have a feeling.
I have quite a few comments on this one because I found this confusing reading it. And what you just said in my mind, doesn't match with what we have.
Yep.
So when I read this, I see that, let's say in zonings, CCRC, CMU, I'm reading this that they could have level 1, level 2, or level 3 because it doesn't exclude the others. Whereas all the others could have either level 1 or level 2 because it doesn't say that they can only have a certain one. And then with that, my question is why? Only because I personally have an electric vehicle. And if I'm going somewhere and I do for some reason need to charge it, I obviously prefer the charging that goes a lot faster. So I'm not sure why that one wouldn't be allowed in certain areas.
So the level 2 still permits it within generally all the zoning districts. That is the medium charge, a little bit faster of a charge. The level 3 truly should only be for higher commercial. That's why they're only permitted in the CCRC and CMU and industrial districts. So that still would capture generally everything along Harmony Road within all those zoning districts for a little bit higher intensity commercial. We can tweak the language a little bit on that level 1. The way we said it was it's permitted in all residential. So since it's only listing the residential, that's where it's only permitted, but we can tweak that if you want a little bit stronger language to say only in residential. The reason why we changed that was those are typically your longer charge, 8 hours. If you put them at a grocery store, you put them at a Qdoba, they don't serve the purpose.
Yeah, I understand why we would only have why level 3 should be in the commercial, but I don't know why level 3 could not be allowed in, let's say, apartment complexes or something like that.
We can look at that. And if you want to make that modification, that's fine. It just with the rapid charge that is level 3, somebody at an apartment complex would typically more be charging it overnight as if you were in a residence.
I can tell you that that is not true based on my own charging experiences at my own home, where there are times where I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot to charge it overnight. I need a quick charge. I just don't, I guess for me, it doesn't hurt anything to allow those to be used in residential areas. Along with this, I'm also going to kind of mention the comment that we got, the public comment that we got related to this. I have in the past spoken to this person about electric charging, as I'm sure you have probably also heard from. And just based on some of that data with numbers of car registrations that are related to electric vehicles, I do wonder if it would be helpful to have our numbers be for a certain percentage, knowing that cars are based, if a certain percentage of vehicles are electric vehicles, I feel like a percentage of parking should be tied to that as well.
So I have actually talked with Fort Collins on this. Right now, it's only in their building code. It's not even in their land use code. And the way that Fort Collins has it set up right now is it's also EV ready. So they don't even require that the station be installed with the development. So it's only wired for, that station to be installed. They also, the 5% is based off of what is generally just provided. Fort Collins does a minimum and the maximum parking spaces required in their code. I actually did a comparison on our code, our requirement versus theirs for an office, a retail, and what they provide at 5% is actually what we would provide with our 1 in general and then 1 per 75 thereafter. So even though we have it a little bit different, we are actually a little bit above Fort Collins right now by putting it in our land use code and having those stations be installed to where they have it as just EV ready. And they do it as a percentage off of that. So as a number of stations, we're comparable minus the residential. But for commercial, their 5% requirement is actually in line with what we have in our code, where what this is being proposed for.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next one is for site lighting. When we get into smaller developments, if you guys might remember with the Timnath Ranch 5th, right now our requirement is that each site be providing lighting that cuts off at the property boundary. That's starting to become a little bit more difficult, especially in the Harmony corridor where we have buildings right up to the 50-foot setback. And at most times that's on the property line. So that is starting to become an issue of an allowance for there. So we're requesting that the foot candles diminish to 0, 10 feet beyond the property's boundary. And then another thing that we are adding in, because we've actually gotten some requests for it, is that lighting for private drives can also be done by lighting on site. So for instance, the Come and Go and the Timnath Beverage, they could have provided a dual head at the property boundary that could have also illuminated the private drive instead of having additional poles that were out there specifically for the private drive versus not. And we're only proposing this for private drives, not public roadways. So if there's a development that is on private drives, you could kind of kill two birds with one stone of having the lighting on site illuminate the private drives as well. The next one, this is for adding in administrative waivers for up to 10% of a dimensional standard. This is generally for, we would kind of look at this as items that are kind of after the fact. Things, you know, if we've got a neighbor that wants to put up a 6.5 foot tall fence because they're on a slope or something like that, that 10% would, you know, allow for some flexibility within that for staff. If there was a homeowner that had a unique lot that their deck couldn't quite meet setbacks, you know, staff could do an administrative waiver for something along those lines to allow for that 10% kind of variance within a dimensional standard within the code from that standpoint. So it is just a 10% change to allow for staff for, you know, some odds and ends items like that. If there was a waiver being requested of a site, we would still require that waiver come forward to at least Planning Commission to be considered. And depending on the severity of it, also have you as council do it. But this is just to kind of allow for staff to have some flexibility when we have some unique situations with some potential home builders or, you know, homeowners with what they want to do with their lot, or we get into some unique challenges on a site design.
Kevin, could you give us some examples specifically about, you know, what this would look like and kind of what the scope of these waivers would be? And are these things that are, you know, varying by inches or feet or, you know, 100-foot fence? What is it?
So these would be on, this is generally would be more inches. Like I had mentioned, if we've got a, you know, neighbor that's on the downslope to his, you know, up neighbor and on a 6-foot fence, they want to, you know, have it just a little bit taller to give them a little bit more flexibility on privacy. We could get them to 6.5 feet. So just 6 inches, you know, and something like that. I would say a more recent example was we had a builder that they put in a pool storage shed on the side of the building, and their contractor built it 3 inches too deep. So we actually, the options were that they come before you as council or that they cut back the pad in the building itself. So on something like that, when we're talking 3 inches, staff could have that flexibility to look at it and have that waiver opportunity. In this instance, that builder didn't want to go through the process because they had a closing with their, you know, homeowner shortly thereafter. So they felt it was going to be quicker for them to do that. But things like that is generally more of what we'd be looking for on this. It's matter of inches, not matter of feet from that standpoint.
Okay. Can you give me sense in terms of the frequency that, you know, this would be utilized? How often does this come up?
It doesn't come up too often. It's not a frequent thing. And like I'd mentioned, if we've got a site plan that, you know, is looking for waivers from Harmony corridor, we'd be looking at that still coming forward to Planning Commission and Council. It wouldn't be for, you know, architectural changes or anything like that. As we, you know, saw with the Timnath Beverage, that the waivers that they had requested for architecture would still come before. That's not a staff eligible waiver review. But I mean, we're getting into more and more as we come along, but it's not an entirely frequent thing that we would have. It just from years past to now, we're getting more and more as we come through, but it's not as if we're getting 3 a week.
So is the goal just to reduce the administrative burden on the town or the town citizens?
It's more of efficiency. Like I mentioned, if we've got, a unique lot where a person can't quite get their deck to meet criteria, we'd have a couple of inches that we could, fluctuate with that. It's just more of an efficiency instead of having, a potential of a deck waiver for a couple inches or a fence waiver for a couple inches come before you. It's more of an efficiency side of things.
Thank you.
The next one that we have is just cleaning up the minor annexation application fee. It was inadvertently in our code for $500, where our annexation fee is different from that. So just a quick cleanup item on that. The next one that we have, this starts to get into more of the parks and open space requirement. As we were looking at our code, we had some varying numbers. For instance, part of our code said that neighborhood park for every 200 dwelling units should be provided and at 5 acres. And then a different section of the code, we had that every 300 dwelling units, a 6-acre park would be provided. So what we've done is we've kind of cleaned that up to be for every 300 dwelling units that a pocket park shall be provided at 6 acres. With an additional 1 acre per 100 dwelling units over 300. So in that scenario, if there's a 400 unit subdivision, that would be 7 acres of a neighborhood park that they would have to provide. And then along with the quarter-mile radius centrally located within a quarter-mile of the whole subdivision. And then with that, what we also updated was our pocket park requirement. It was one for every 50 dwelling units. When we get some of these kind of smaller one-offs, 40 units, 30 units, that didn't trigger a pocket park. So what we did was we did the minor subdivision minimum, which is, or maximum, which is 6. So anything over 6 that kicks into our major subdivision requires that neighborhood park. And then we added in language for that, that the pocket parks be equally distributed on the outskirts of the neighborhood park as best as possible, or generally to serve the residents within the subdivision. And then the other thing that we've added in with this kind of to the xeriscape options is that at least 70% of the parkland must include irrigated landscaping, including playgrounds, multi-purpose courts, multi-purpose play fields, shaded picnic areas, sitting areas, and some of that could be a artificial turf if so requested. And then the remaining 30% can be made up of native landscaping, but must be incorporating trails and seating areas. And then they must be irrigated from that standpoint, be an irrigated native area. And then the other thing that we did, which we've started to kind of see as an issue, is when we get individual final plats coming in that are 100, 150 lots, those don't necessarily trigger the neighborhood park requirement. So what we've done is now added in language that once we get to the 300th platted lot of a subdivision, that neighborhood park that is shown on their sketch plan be installed. That way the residents within those first 300 units have that level of service of a park area instead of future down the line.
I have a question on, so when you mentioned the quarter-mile radius,
yep.
Let's say for the neighborhood parks, it says shall be centrally located to service all residents within a quarter-mile radius.
Yep.
Meaning that every resident should be within a quarter of a mile of a park, or a radius of what?
Of the park. So it's generally to be that we know that some neighborhoods are going to be a little bit different. But it's to try and get the park centrally located, that generally, as best as they can, every resident within that quarter of a mile can access that neighborhood park easier, and have better access to it. And then that's why we have the pocket park language that then says that those be on that outskirts of the quarter mile radius, so that those folks that do end up further away out still have closer access to a park. That way we don't have a park like, for instance, your neighborhood, the Three Bell and River Pass, where that's the open area right now. If that was the park, the folks down in the, kind of south and in the Folsom area would be on that outskirt and not necessarily be, accessible to that as easy.
So what happens in neighborhoods that are really big that cannot have a neighborhood park within a quarter mile? Do they have to apply for a variance, or like what if they don't meet this? Because in my mind, if I'm a developer and I'm using this as my guideline, does that mean they'd have to put in more than one neighborhood park?
It depends. And that's where we also have an allowance to split. Once you get up to a certain number of units, you're allowed to split. What we say is in the next session, subdivisions over 600 dwelling units may divide the required acreage of neighborhood parks evenly and shall be constructed in the subdivision within a quarter mile. So when we get up to 600 unit, like at Timnath Landings, that's when they have a majority of that park, but they can then split to have different acreage in the north, in the south, to still satisfy that requirement.
I'm just wondering if we're going to exclude some people right now. Like I look at my neighborhood and there's no way I'm anywhere close to a quarter of a mile, which I'm fine with not being that close. But what would have happened to that developer as they were presenting all of that? Would they have been denied?
And that's why it's to the best of their ability within the quarter mile. We know that there are issues with a oblong development, but that's why we also have the pocket park requirement that they be on that outskirt of the quarter mile to serve those residents that aren't within a quarter mile.
Can we maybe add some language that lets people know that? Because this is our guiding document. If we're using this, then we have to kind of try to stand by it or have a way that they can request something different.
Is there something different that you would be?
Well,
the way we have it is that it's generally located within a quarter mile. From that standpoint. So
is that just a subjective kind of thing?
It is a bit of a subjective.
Okay. And that's fine if that's what it is.
Moving on. So the next one is just a quick tweak to the Harmony corridor standards. What we used to have in the criteria was that parking lots shall not extend more than 130 feet along the Harmony Road frontage. What you all may remember is that the Come and Go actually came in for a waiver to that requirement, just because their drive aisle was the thing that was larger than 130 feet. So what we've done within that is actually just include drive aisles as listed within what cannot extend more than 130 feet along the Harmony frontage, just to give that some more clarity. The next is also within Harmony corridor, and it's to change the planting bed requirement of a minimum of 5 feet. Not all planting beds within a development can really meet that, especially when you're at an entrance to a site or when you're around a building that may have, drive aisle around it. So basically what we've done within that is just to remove the 5 feet and say reductions may be allowed on a case-by-case basis, but typically keep that 5 foot as a standard, but in some certain instances allow that reduction for that planting bed. And then the last one that we have is a change to the dimensional standards for the land use or for air conditioning units and window wells. It was a little vague what we had before of just saying it not be closer than 2 feet on to property lines with a 7 foot and 5 yard, and then 1 foot on a 5 foot side yard. And then the window wells that are part of a foundation need to meet setback requirements. That language of part of the foundation, we have found with our building official is a little too vague. So what we've done is now change it to be that window wells in areas open to the basement, that they shall only encroach 3 feet into the required setback, just to give that a little bit more clarity. And those are all the changes.
Kevin, can I circle back real quick to the administrative waivers?
Yep.
I'm just curious, surrounding jurisdictions, do they have similar administrative waivers, or would we be breaking new ground with this?
No, a lot of municipalities around and in general do have an allowance for administrative waivers. Actually, a lot of them, a lot of municipalities have certain things such as site plans be administrative for review and things like that. So this isn't out of the normal. We used to have administrative waivers, and then previous councils actually asked to have it removed. But as we've kind of gotten into more requests, staff just feels that it might be for the efficiency side of things too, for a couple of inches on things to add that back in.
Do you have any sense of when that prior request was made, how long ago that was?
I was part of that prior request. That prior request was back in about 2017. The backstory to that, and actually in this day and age, it wouldn't even be applicable because it was for a childcare facility. We had the administrative waivers within the code at that time, and we had requirements of separation between childcare facilities, which was 1,000 feet. We had a childcare facility that had submitted an application to the town that was, as the crow flies, 990 feet away. So at that time, staff made the allowance that child care facility could be allowed just because it was on 2 different streets away, even though the 1,000 feet was at the crow flies. That existing childcare facility operator did not appreciate that, went to council to request that be removed. And council at that time agreed with that. And then that's where we removed administrative waivers, was because of that one incident. But now, as we've seen, we cannot restrict childcare facilities like that. So it would have been a non-issue in this day and age.
In that specific case, I suppose, but it's tough to predict what the next one will be. Okay.
So let me get my arms around this. So we've got this presented. I'd say at least 90% we're all going to agree with, but I think there's some items over there. Let's just list the concerns. So Lisa, you made the concern about charge stations.
Yeah, so it's on page 220 of the packet. And what I would suggest is changing
What I'd like to do is just make the list and then come back and get the details.
Yep, just that one.
So charge stations, and I think the other, did you get your concern on parks resolved?
Yeah, I think we're a little redundant. There's like a section of the parks, and then parks are mentioned again in open space. And I don't necessarily think we need to, but it's not an issue that I'm.
Yeah, there are 2 sections of code that talk about parks and open space. That's why both of them are changed. That's what we had the discrepancy on originally, was that there was one section that talked about 5 acres for every 200, and then one that talked about 300 for every.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like open space, we don't need to talk about parks when we have a separate parks one, but.
So you're okay with that? Did you have anything? And all I want is the list, Robert.
I guess I'm interested in just some discussion on the administrative waivers.
We're going to talk about all of them, but so I'm going to put administrative waivers right here, though. Okay, Luke, Brett.
Yeah, just the waivers, and also I just want to check, are we doing a public hearing as well, public comment on this before we dive into?
This is a public comment or a public hearing.
Pardon?
This is a public hearing.
Yeah, I know, but we can talk before we do the public hearing.
Okay, just want to make sure we didn't miss it.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. So, and I agree with, I think at least 4 people here understand administrative waivers better. And actually, I think I understand it. So I'm going to start the discussion and then go to Lisa, go to Robert, and then if you guys have any extra you want to add. But I'd like to keep the land use the same as it was based on a bunch of things. One is the Planning Commission voted to not have those to allow those not to allow the waivers.
There were, 3 of the planning commission members voted to remove that. 2 of them felt that having the administrative waivers seemed appropriate.
Whatever. There's I think it reads different than that, but I'm not going to sit there and get excited about it. I have a real I do not agree with the theoretical process of allowing staff to do waivers. I think we've got a checks and balance of which the staff proposes the land use, that's the rules, that we follow those rules. And if we decide to not follow those rules, that should then go to council for approval. And, if we don't do that, we're not following a good judiciary legislative process of checks and balances to make sure that the process works well. And so I personally want to have the changes that were made on 29-115 be removed because of the fact that I think it takes away the natural checks and balances of town government.
There are some public signed up for public comments. So if you want to move to
I
the
understand.
public comments,
I want to talk and
Just
then
might change
we'll go
your-
to the public comment.
Okay.
Lisa.
So you want me to go to the electric charging one?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I do agree, sometimes getting public comment is helpful for me to understand other people's perspectives before making comments, because sometimes if they bring up a valid point, it might change my opinion on something.
Well, we can still have a discussion after that.
Okay. So I would suggest that on page 220, that under A, that we keep the zoning areas and say that they are allowed to have level 1, level 2, or level 3. And then when we go to B, maybe say that they are required to have either level 2 or level 3. And then under C, that they are required to have C. Because right now the way level 3, because right now the way it's worded where it says level 3 charging stations shall only be permitted, it doesn't say they can't have a level 1 or level 2, just based on the wording. So I would make it very clear that if you are community commercial, community mixed use, so on, that you are required to have a level 3. Rather than saying that you can have a level 3, but it doesn't say you can't have 1 or 2. So that would be my suggestions on that piece.
Okay. Robert?
I'd like to discuss the waivers more, but I'd like to hear public comment first.
My only thought, I wanted to ask on why was the parking stalls removed from that?
So the parking stalls were removed if we start requiring additional electric vehicle parking spaces, that does remove from the general parking spaces that are out there. So one of 2 things would happen is there's either an increase in parking spaces that are required for a site to then accommodate for the additional electric vehicle charging spaces, which then potentially can reduce open space, or there's not enough parking for other general vehicles.
Comment on the administrative waivers and public comment can feel free to respond to what I have to say, and then that, I likely said, that may impact my thinking as well. I mean, I certainly appreciate the examples that the staff has given me on that. That's good to know. I know in the 3 years I've been on the council, I've never voted on a waiver that was 2-3 inches. I've just never seen it. There may be various reasons for that. And in the year or two I followed the council before that, I never saw a waiver of that extent. So what I'm a little bit concerned about is we do have some fairly significant developments coming along, and I'm not sure we fully appreciate how this impacts some of these larger developments that are coming in. There's a common comment out there that a developer's asked for 120 waivers, and I don't know what any of those waivers are. I haven't, because that process hasn't gotten to us yet, or how many will even get to us. So I'm inclined to think that, yeah, we ought to hold off on this. I'm certainly sympathetic to the idea, and I'm fine with staff even bringing it back up to us down the road. As if we can think a little bit more about it. And I mean, to Robert's question about the history of it, I mean, all due respect to staff, I know there was a bit of friction between that resident and staff, and that's what led to the council deciding that that right need to be retained by the council to help avoid those type of situations in the future. And so, yeah, I think it's a good idea to hold off on moving forward with administrative waivers.
Melissa, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we do. Dr. Bill Jenkins.
Sure. Dr. Bill Jenkins, 5507 Sugarloaf Court. I previously spoke at the Planning Commission meeting on this item. The Planning Department worked hard at improving the land use codes as it pertains to landscape and EV standards. These are real improvements, and the department is to be commended. I think the public comment letter with recommendations requiring adequate electric supply for EV charges makes sense. Hopefully that would be part of any planning sign off on EV charger installations. Also, to Lisa's point and to the letter's point, given the increase in the percentage of EVs expected over the next 5 to 10 years, the suggestion to increase the density of EV spaces beyond what the code modification calls for makes sense as well. Article 2.9.15 gives the development director the discretion to allow up to 10% variance, more than a couple inches, on dimensional standards for both residential and commercial, without the ability for public comment or review by either the Planning Commission or the Town Council. While it does seem at first glance to improve efficiency and the speed at which projects will be approved, it's fundamentally flawed, to the mayor's point. The whole point of public comment and review by the Planning Commission and Town Council is to ensure that the public and their representatives have some oversight when building plans exceed current building codes. Perhaps the use code amendment number 13 could be passed without Article 2.9.15 in accordance with the recommendations of the Planning Commission, but with the recommendation to also consider updating it further with the suggestions provided on the EV through the public comment letter. I thought they were quite well considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa?
That's it.
That's all?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have to close it? Public comment?
Actually, I didn't open it. So let's just say I opened it at
Could you repeat yourself there?
8:45, and now I'm closing it at 8:48.
All right. Did that provide you with other things you want to talk about?
I guess I will just share that while I do believe in common sense and holding up projects for a matter of inches, often doesn't make sense. It sounds like this doesn't come up frequently enough that the council couldn't review these. And given that there's recent history on this, I think maybe it makes sense to revisit the administrative waivers at a different time.
So I'm going to add a couple things that I would possibly like to change, sorry. Related to the electric vehicle charging, I do think that rather than removing D, the parking stalls shall be signed and striped, I think we should keep that in. If I live in an apartment complex, for example, and I need to charge my car and somebody is parked there who's not charging a car, that would be really frustrating as an EV owner. So I think if it's designed to be electric charging parking, I think that that's what it should be designed for. I'll keep the ones that I had mentioned earlier, and I think that's about it. And I agree with the other council members about the waiver piece.
Brett?
I'll just make one more comment. Just to staff, let's talk over the next quarter before we do our next round of updates regarding some of those suggestions that Mr. Cloudman suggested on the electrical vehicles, just to make sure if there's any further adjustments we need to make next quarter. So just let's talk before we do the next round on these. Thanks.
Luke?
Yeah, after hearing some of the comments, I would agree with the administrative waivers that we should wait just with everything that's going on. I do believe in efficiency and I think we should strive towards it, but I just don't think it's the right time.
Okay, so do we do the amendments first?
So you would have a motion to approve the resolution approving the land use code with the modifications, and then you would specify the modifications. Or you could ask council staff to bring this back to you at the next meeting and then approve it.
Okay, I think they're small enough that we ought to be able to do it.
I do have one thing. So with the multifamily, we are keeping that those EV stations in multifamily are designated for EV parking. This would be in commercial that the signage isn't required for it. So multifamily, the language in there right now says that in multifamily, each space shall be signed and designated for EV parking.
I think we still keep it for commercial and all of that as well. I know if, somebody's taking a road trip, there are maps that show charging stations. So if you're planning a trip and you are expecting to be at a certain place, I just think that we need to have those available for those drivers.
Okay. So.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I move to approve, and I have no idea because I'm on the wrong page here, approve this motion with
Here, just a
the
sec. I'll get you started and you can get going. So let's see. I would like a motion to approve ordinance number 8, series 2023, an ordinance amending Charter 16, Article 6 of the Timnath Land Use Code with the following amendments. One is to delete all changes made on the proposal under section 2.9.15.
And under section 5.8.18, changing A to allow all of those zonings to have level 1, level 2, or level 3 charging stations. Under B, to require all of those zonings to have either level 2 or level 3 charging. And then for C, requiring those zonings to have level 3 charging.
Okay, I'm waiting for a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion is carried unanimously. Any other comments anybody has or wants? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I eagerly move to adjourn.
Yeah. Second. And I'll jump on seconding that.
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.